Will you join me in a word of prayer? Gracious Heavenly Father, we ask you to bless us this day. Remind us of who you are. Show yourself to us today. And Lord, lead us and guide us as we follow you. Lord, all of this we ask, offer, and pray in your name. And all God's people said, Amen. Today we are starting a new sermon series entitled Kingdom of Israel, where we are looking at the stories of David and Solomon and how those stories from the Old Testament and the Kingdom of Israel lead us to the birth of our Savior Jesus on Christmas Day. Today we are looking at the first story in this. We call this David Part 1, where David is anointed. And we look at this big idea, this thought for today of the Lord looks at the heart. As I was doing some research and looking through this, I came across a story that kind of fit. See, back during World War I, Frederick Davis, sergeant in the Army, was sent to war. He was drafted. And during that time, people from around the country would write letters to our soldiers to remind them of back home, to give him that connection and that knowing that somebody still cares for them here in the States. Frederick was one of those such people. But the person who got his name was a woman by the name of Lindsay. And they wrote back and forth for years. From the time that Frederick was in boot camp to the time Frederick was in Europe to the time Frederick came home. And they wrote and wrote and wrote. And this time of just dialogue and conversation back and forth in letters turned into something more. It was a budding love that Frederick had and that Lindsay had for Frederick. Frederick, after about a year and a half of knowing that this Lindsay was somebody that he really cared about and loved, asked, will you send me a picture? I'd love to see who you are. And Lindsay would always write back with, not yet. We're going to wait. Finally, Frederick came home to a letter from Lindsay. And the letter was very simply, I would love to meet you. Meet me at Union Station on this date. Well, Frederick was overjoyed. He immediately grabbed pencil and paper, and started writing and wrote Lindsay back saying, I will meet you at Union Station at the time and date that you have. Please have a rose in your right hand and a book in your left hand so I can identify who you are. I will be holding one of your letters, and mailed it off to her. When the day came, Frederick was so excited. He got there an hour early just to make sure he was ready. And he stood in the middle of Union Station in New York with thousands of people all over the place, looking and waiting for the love of his life, Lindsay, to show up. And in his memoirs, he writes that as he stood there, he saw off in the distance a woman in a red dress. He said it was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his entire life. He describes her as an angel sent from God. He said she was wearing a long red dress with white gloves up to her elbows and a nice white hat. And he watched her as she walked towards him. And he did think to himself, I could not possibly be this lucky. She's got to be Lindsay, but there's no way. And as she got closer and closer, he noticed she didn't have a rose and didn't have a book. And with a little bit of disappointment, he kept watching her as she walked by. And she looked at him and gave him a sassy smile and said, going my way, soldier, and walked by. To which Frederick did what any guy would do. After looking over his shoulder at a time, he started to debate whether he should just give up and follow this beautiful woman out of the train station. But he decided to look back, and standing in front of him with a rose in her right hand and a book in her left, was a, as he describes, plump, short, older woman standing looking at him. Frederick looks down at this woman and does this. And thinks to himself as he rocks back and forth, he says, this may not be the love that I dreamed of, but this could be a wonderful friendship. This could be a loving friendship that could last for years and years and years. So maybe I don't marry this woman, but I'll have a friend that will last a lifetime. He takes off his hat and puts it under his arm. He stands straight and tall and he says, Lindsay, I am Sergeant Frederick Davis, who've written you for a long time. I love you very much, and it would be my honor to take you to lunch. And hands her the letter that she wrote. And this lady looks at him with a little bit of a puzzled look on his face, or in her face. And she says, son, I don't know what's going on here, but a woman in a red dress gave me a rose and a book and asked me to come and see you and tell you that if you ask me to lunch, she's at the restaurant across the street and you ought to meet her. Frederick, in a very polite way, said, bye, and took off. Lindsay was looking at Frederick not by what he looked like. She wanted to know his heart. She wanted to know what kind of man Frederick was. And that's how God wants to look at each of us. Today in our story that we heard read from our children's storybook Bible, we heard of how Samuel was called by God to choose the next king, and it was going to be one of the sons of Jesse. Now, can you imagine this? Jesse bringing these boys in front of Samuel, and God saying, nope. Each one of them bigger and stronger and more masculine than the next. Each one being what should look like a king. Each one being just the epitome of what people would want as a leader. And as Samuel would walk with his oil to anoint, God would say, nope, not that one. Nope, not that one. And I'm sure Samuel is sitting here going, what is going on? These are kings. They look like kings. And God continually said no. Because God didn't care what they looked like. You see, for us, society gives us these words. You're not something enough. You're not smart enough. You're not tall enough. You're not strong enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not handsome enough. You're not the prom king. You're not the prom queen. You're not what we need. And it hurts when society looks at us like that, doesn't it? But here's the deal. God doesn't look at that. God doesn't care about what you look like on the outside. God doesn't care about any of that. All he cares about is what's on the inside. He cares about the heart. He cares about your character and who you are on the inside, just like he did with David. You see, David was a shepherd boy, the lowest of the low. Think of the dirtiest job you've seen, and then go beneath that, and that's what a shepherd was. They were left alone for days at a time to do nothing. And David not only was a son, but he was the runt of the litter. He was itty-bitty. Hence why we had this story called the Teeny-Weeny King. Okay. And Samuel goes out to anoint him, and God says, that's the one. This little itty-bitty kid who's a shepherd boy, who doesn't look the part, isn't old enough to be the part, and shouldn't be the part, is who God calls to be king. You see, God looks at the heart. It's your heart that matters to God. It's the character within you that matters. Now you may be asking yourself, what is this character? What does this mean? Character is great, but what does this look like for God? Let's take a look. Scripture tells us. It shows us it right away. Philippians 4 verse 8. You can look, I encourage you to pull out your Pew Bible and you can look it up with me. Philippians 4:8. It's on page 1675 of your Pew Bible. 1675. Philippians 4 verse 8. Where Paul is writing to the Philippians and communicating and dialogue with them about things that are going on and things that he sees, how he wants them to be and who he wants them to be. And Philippians 4:8 says this, finally, brothers and sisters, it's like he's talking to us. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Character is about what's true and what's noble, what's right, what's pure, what's lovely. That's the character that God is looking for. There's another verse here we can look at. Galatians 5, verses 22 to 23. It's on page 1663 of your Pew Bible. 1663. Again, Paul writing a letter to the Galatians here, telling them what he sees and how they can act and who they can be. And he says these words to them. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Character is love, joy, peace. I like the word patience. I remember that one from memory work. Gentleness, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. Those are characteristics God's looking for. The problem is that we aren't always loving and kind and nice and pure, and I know I ain't patient. I went shopping on Black Friday, and faithful and gentle. So there's one other characteristic God is looking for. In Matthew 22. It's on page 1409 of your Pew Bible. Matthew 22, verse 37. These are the two characteristics God is looking for. These are the two things that make us who we are in God. This is what your heart is all about. In verse 37 of Matthew 22 on page 1409, it says this. As Jesus is talking to others, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. That, brothers and sisters, is what God is looking for. Love him with all your heart and mind. That's what the heart is all about. It's not how tall you are. It's not how big you are. It's not how awesome you are. I know you're going to be like 6'10", but okay. It's not any of those things. It's about the love of God. And the second characteristic is just like it in 39. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's what God is looking for. To put others first and love him. That's how God chooses his team. Chooses his team. I don't know if any of you did this, but when I was in grade school, one of my three favorite subjects, I loved PE, lunch, and recess were my three favorite subjects, was PE. And we had this great custom in PE when we would do things like dodgeball and kickball and all of that, was we would pick captains and they would select teams. Anybody ever go through that? Yeah. It's like the rite of passage for grade school, right? And it's the worst thing imaginable you can do. Because if you're not picked first, a little bit of your confidence starts whittling away, right? And you certainly didn't want to be picked last. I had this. less than a year ago. I'm 47 years old, okay? We had a whole bunch of DCE students come here for an event. DCE students, mind you. And they decided to play a pickup game of basketball in the gym. Now, I know I'm like 6'10 and can jump. But I told them, I said, I'll play. What the heck? It'll be fun. And so they picked captains and picked teams. I was the last one, but not just the last one. No, you take it. No, you take it. No, you take it. No, you take it. They didn't know I averaged 30 points a game in college on my IM team, but that's beside the point. The fun part is that even as a 47-year-old man, a little bit of your competence gets whittled away. God doesn't care about that. He doesn't care if you can dunk a basketball. He doesn't care if you can bench press 300 pounds. He doesn't care if you're on the cover of GQ or Vanity Fair. He doesn't care if your checkbook is bouncing with huge amounts of dollars, or you wear gold jewelry, you wear Armani suits or Wrangler jeans from Walmart. He doesn't care. All he cares about is your heart. That's what matters. So brothers and sisters, today I want to challenge you with one thing. Have your heart for God. Live your heart for God, knowing that God looks internally at who you are on the inside. Knowing that you are special to God, and that He loves you because you love Him. And all God's people said,